Okay, so I'll start off with a story. On Sunday, I went to go see my mom, and um, it was nice. And that's it. Just kidding. But my mom's married to my stepdad, so they've been dating since I was 6 years old, and they finally got married in 2012 or 17. I don't know. Pretty recently. And my stepdad, he's from the Middle East. He's Lebanese, and he's an atheist. So, and he's very. You thought I was confrontational? He is far more confrontational, and he's very opinionated, but he's also he has a very good heart. I don't know if you've met like people that have been born and raised in that culture. They just think differently than a lot of how our culture is raised. It's like, I don't know if they're like anointed because like Jesus lived in that era, in that area of the Middle East, but like they know how to serve. They genuinely care for people. They're generous. They just have all those qualities, and so he has a lot of those qualities. But on one side, he's an atheist, and I don't know like what happened for him to think that he wanted to be an atheist. I don't know, but there's something there that I don't know. And his best friend came, so as we're there, his best friend came down from Washington. He's known him since they were younger. And the best friend is he's like a nature guy. He's very calm spirit, just talks. He's positive. And he was, when I haven't seen him since I was maybe 14. So he hasn't seen me in 16 years, and he was like, wow, you're so different. There's something different about you, and I'll get to that part later. But he was asking me questions about God constantly. I already know nowadays, like from pastor's testimony, like I don't have to evangelize. Your evangelism is just lead by example, and then people will just start asking you questions. And so that was what's happening. I already know if you try to shove the word down somebody's throat, it's just going to start an argument, you know? And so we went to dinner, sushi, and we were sitting at the table, and the best friend, my stepdad's name is Rob. Not Rob Johnson, but Rob. And what's funny is his last name is Matar, Matar, which is crazy to think about. So my mom married somebody with just one extra letter on the last name. And so we're at the dinner table, and out of nowhere, his best friend asked me, he's like, hey, so I know your mom told me that you're really involved in the church. And he's like, I believe that as we go throughout I believe that there's some higher power out there. It's obvious that there's some other creator out there. He's like, I don't know if it's God or Buddha or, he's naming, because he's not sure. He's curious, and he's like, I believe us humans, we spend our whole life seeking. And he's like, I could just tell that you found that. He's like, I'm just happy that you found what you're seeking, And he's like, I just want to ask you some questions, like why. I didn't initiate any of this. He just started asking me. He's like, why, he's like, tell me about that. Like, tell me about, like, how does someone come to find what they're seeking? It was a very broad question, and I'm thinking like, oh, Lord, help me answer this. I don't know what to say. And I understand when, in that verse, when, I think it was when, I can't remember if it was Jesus or somebody, they said to Peter, like, don't worry, when they drag you to the synagogues, you don't even have to think of a word to say because the Holy Spirit will speak for you in that moment. And I get that now because I was like, man, like, what if somebody asked me, like, these really hard questions, Like, yes, I've been trained to a certain extent, but, like, I don't have all the answers, you know. God has the answers, and he has to speak through me. And like just stuff started coming out of my mouth, and as it's coming out of my mouth, I'm thinking like, oh, that's a good point. Like, yeah, like, am I saying that, you know? And I'm sure that's how pastors and maybe other leaders feel when they counsel people. But he was asking me, and I was like, you know, the first thing that came out of my mouth, it's like, it's not my job to save you. You know, I was like, let's just talk about God, because that's what I know, right? Whether you believe in some other higher power, I'm going to talk about God because that's what I know. And I was like, with God, you know, a lot of people's perspective about God get ruined because of that person's religion. For example, let me clear it up. Let's say there's a Christian and somebody wants to get saved. We've heard a million of these stories. That Christian leads by really bad example or tries to convert somebody out of their own strength, and they just end up knocking heads or something like that. And then this non-believer now has a bad taste in their mouth because of their bad experience with the person who represented God, not in a good way. You guys following what I'm saying? Okay, so I'm like, that's, you know, a lot of Christians are very hypocritical, especially a lot of them out there in the world. So a lot of people have a bad taste in their mouth about God because someone misrepresented God. And I was like, you know, what I learned is my job is not to save you. That's God's job. If God wants to save somebody, he's going to save that person. My job is to lead by example. My job is not to shove the word down somebody's throat. My job is to lead by example and love that person in the way that God leads me. I can't just say I got to love that person. God leads in a certain way. God might love a person in this way. God might love that person in this way and this person in that way. I have to be led by God and love them through that avenue. And as they feel God inside of me, the Holy Spirit will start working on their heart, and now he'll start to save them. And I was telling him, I was like, you know, a lot of people want to take the credit. A lot of people want to say, oh, I saved that person. I remember when I was at Zoom, there was this guy, and like they started this group chat about like, you know, some Christian group chat, and anytime somebody joined, they were like, yep, I just added that person. You know, like, it just bothered me because it was like they were saying like, oh, yep, I got that person saved. Oh, yep, I got that. And it was just like anytime someone joined, they would screenshot the number and they would post it in the group chat. I'm like, is that what this is about? Or it's just a number counting game? Like we're just counting people like their change, like money? And that really bothered me. And so I was telling him, like, people want to take credit for saving somebody. And so they'll go all these lengths to try to shove the word down somebody's throat and save them, and then be like, yep, that was me. But most of the time, it just ends in argument, right? And as I was saying this, Rob's best friend, he asked Rob, you're not going to say anything? And Rob was like, I have an opinion, but I'd rather not. And I've had conversations with Rob, and I know his personality, so I don't get offended, but he's very confrontational and opinionated, and he'll poke at my question, like, why is that? What makes you think that you're so smart that you would think that's the right answer? Like, stuff like that, you know, and I have to keep my cool. But anyways, he didn't say anything, and me and the guy kept talking, and then out of nowhere, Rob speaks up, and he was like, and I caught this because he said it in between the lines. He was like, you know, Christians are so judgmental. He's like, you make one mistake and they're always just on you. And they're always saying what you did wrong. And, oh, you're not going to be successful. You're going to go to hell and this and that. And I was like, I was talking to the best friend. I was like, this is why it's hard for people to make a connection with God, because God's representatives aren't handling things properly. And so that avenue, right, God uses us as ambassadors. And if we're not handling things properly, we cannot be the gateway, like the middleman to work with God so that person can be saved. You see what I mean? And so he just started talking to like, yeah, Christians are judgmental and blah, 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 this and that. And then he said out of his own mouth, and he was like, you know how somebody's like, hey, I know a friend, like when somebody kind of speaks in that manner, he was kind of talking like that. He said, he's like, look, if there was a certain person, you know, his words, if there was a certain person who was religious and they lived in such a way by example and they didn't judge me, then I would start to become curious about that person. His words, coming from an atheist. I would start to become curious about that person. And if they treated me in the same way over time, maybe, just maybe, I would be converted. And I was like, interesting. This is coming out of the mouth of an atheist, you know? And it started getting me thinking, like, okay, that's for people outside the church, but we have even problems inside the church, right? We have problems where, yes, we have people that come here for God, but they have a hard time submitting. And yes, that can be that person's issue. But a lot of times, that can be the leader could be making, let's say there's a leader over them, they could be making it harder for that sheep to come to God. They could be, like Jesus said, if you put a stumbling block in front of the sheep, it's better that you had a millstone hung around your foot or your neck and you thrown into the ocean, right? So God takes that very seriously. And I started thinking, you know, and I got to say, this season of my correction that came in February, I'm so glad that it happened because God's been showing me a lot of, you know, ugly qualities about myself that I'm so glad that some of that stuff is leaving me because I don't want to be like that person. And I'm able to see that this perception of how I used to act. And now it could be my testimony to you guys to show you how messed up people can be sometimes to our own family, to our own sheep, right? And so I'm going to give you guys some verses and I'm going to talk about them. So there's two instances that I was thinking of. There's many instances in the Bible, right, where God comes after somebody and that person may or may not have done wrong. And in most cases, they messed up. That person messed up, right? But God's ways are different than human ways. Human way is, I saw them messed up, I want to keep them down. God's way is, I need to discipline you because I love you, but my heart yearns to restore you. Difference, right? Humans end it at, that person's down, ha. God is, okay, I know, it's like David said, he wounds me, but yet he builds me up. And you think about that. Who does that? Think about, that's not a normal culture-centered human trait. When someone wounds, they stay in that position of wounding. God wounds, but out of love, and then he builds up. Even with Jesus, it pleased God that Jesus was bruised, right? But he yearned to restore him to the right hand of the Father, right? There's a pattern with God's heart. And it shows that God's discipline or wrath, even wrath, the scary part, is still out of the goodness of his heart. Because the end result he's looking for is he wants to restore the person back to him, right? So I'm setting a lot of this up so we can understand. So, for example, there's Babylon. Babylon goes, and God uses Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, to destroy Israel, right? But Babylon takes it too far. And so God now has to come after Babylon later. So Israel did wrong, yes, but Babylon took it too far. You see what I mean? There's a pattern here with humans. Second, there's I'll just read the verse because I keep forgetting. So let's start with, Second Chronicles 28. So this is the king right before Hezekiah. Ahaz was 26 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. Unlike David, his father, he did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord. He followed the ways of the kings of Israel and also made idols for worshiping the Baals. He burned sacrifices in the valley of Ben Hinnom and sacrificed his children in the fire, engaging in the detestable practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. He offered sacrifices and burned incense at the high places, on the hilltops, and under every spreading tree. So pastors talked about that before, right? The green tree can represent your comfort. So God could take you into the promised land, which is where they're at now, and they're getting all this wealth, right? And they get too comfortable, like myself, I've already told you guys, and now God has to come after them. Therefore, the Lord his God delivered him. So the green tree could represent, right, like your comfort. In the shade, everything's nice, and so you're burning incense to the idols under the green tree, right? So you're getting too comfortable, so you start looking to other things other than God. And the green tree could represent your comfort, prosperity. Therefore, the Lord his God delivered him into the hands of the king of Aram. The Arameans defeated him and took many of his people as prisoners and brought them to Damascus. So this is pre-Babylon. So this has already happened. They already went into exile once. He was also given, and this is like a classic example, but it happened all the time in Judges. They messed up. They got delivered into somebody's hands, right? This is the constant pattern. But this one stood out to me. He was also given into the hands, Ahaz was the king of Judah, and God gave Ahaz into the hands of the king of Israel. This is God's people, okay? Aram, that's one thing. Israel is God's people. You see this? So we could look at this as you have the care of somebody, and God has you discipline that person and correct them, but if you take it too far, God's going to come after you. So watch. He was also given into the hands of the king of Israel, who inflicted heavy casualties on him. In one day, Pekah, son of Remaliah, killed 120,000 soldiers in Judah. 120,000 people in a day. That's insane. World War II had or was it World War I or II? Had where's Josh when I need him? Yeah, there had a million in years. This is 120,000 in a day. That's ridiculous. So 120,000 in Judah died because Judah had forsaken the Lord, the God of their ancestors. So at first sight, God is using Israel and Aram to come after Judah. Did Judah do wrong? Yes. But that's not, remember, God's heart is to come after you to restore you, not to come after you to harm you. You see that? God's end goal is always to restore. Zikri, the Ephraimite warrior, killed Maaseiah, the king's son, Azrikam, the officer in charge of the palace, and Elkanah, second to the king. The men of Israel took captive from their fellow Israelites who were from Judah 200,000 wives, sons, and daughters. So Israel, God's people, killed God's people, 120,000 of them, and took 200,000 of their wives. Heavy casualties is the right word. They also took a great deal of plunder, which they carried back to Samaria. They also lost, Judah also lost everything. Here's the key. So it looks like, well, they got what they deserved, right? And part of that is true, but at some point, Israel interjected their own plan into God's plan. How can I explain this? So let's say we've been at the table, or maybe pastor's counseling you on something, and he'll tell you something about another person. This person did this person did this, right? Have you ever wondered why the pastors will bring something up like that in a conversation? Let's say I'm talking to pastor, and me and him are talking, he's counseling me on something. All of a sudden, pastor will say, oh, this person, did this and this, and they're struggling with this and this. Why was that information given to me? Are we just gossiping? No. God allowed that information to be given to me for a reason. One, maybe I'm struggling with the same thing. Or two, maybe I will struggle with something like that later, and I remember how to handle it because that person's going through it now. It's not so I can continue to add to the conversation. You see that? We're all guilty of this, including myself. And what happens is God sometimes, option 3, God will allow this information to come to our mind to see if, now that we have this information, are we going to treat that person with bias now that we know this information? That's the main one I've found over the years. God will allow certain information to come your way, not because you're on the in. We're just deluded if we think like that. It's because God is testing us. With this given information, are we going to treat this sheep with bias? And I personally have, and I've learned the hard way from that. And it's such a natural human reflex. Oh, this person is doing wrong. I can't believe it. Oh, you think you know someone, right? So let me continue. 9. So remember, Judah sacrificed to the idols. They did wrong. They forsook God. So God sent Aram, foreigners, and his own people, Israel, to kill 120,000 Judeans and take 200,000 of their wives and take all their material possessions. So they took a heavy hit. But we see that the Israelis took it too far on Judah because, verse 9, but a prophet of the Lord named Oded was there, and he went out to meet the army, Israel, when it returned to Samaria. He said to them, because the Lord, the God of your ancestors, was very angry with Judah, he gave them into your hand. But, you have slaughtered them in a rage that reaches to heaven, and now you intend to make the men and women of Judah and Jerusalem your slaves. But aren't you also guilty of sins against the Lord your God? Now listen to me. Send back your fellow Israelites you have taken as prisoners, for the Lord's fierce anger rests on you. You see this? So from that chunk, we see that at some point the Israelites took it too far. God may have intended for a certain way, but the Israelites interjected their own plan and said, oh yeah, Judah's bad. We're going to show them, God's using us. We're going to show them what the business is. We're really going to hurt them, right? And God's like, oh, you think they had, you thought they experienced pain? You better repent is basically what he's saying. Because they're like, you better give back, right? You better turn around and repent. Otherwise, I'm going to come after you now. Then some of the leaders in Ephraim, Azariah son of Jehohanan, Berechiah son of Meshillemoth, it's killing me, Jehiskiah son of Shallum, and Amasa son of Hadlai, confronted those who were arriving from the war. So it looks like these are the leaders of Israel who had some sense, and they went to meet their army, the guys of their own people in the army, and say, guys, what are you doing? We must not bring those prisoners here, they said, or we will be guilty before the Lord. Do you intend to add to our sin and guilt? For our guilt is already great, and his fierce anger rests on Israel. So God's fierce anger was on Judah, but in an instant, it's now on Israel because they took it too far. You see this? So the soldiers gave up the prisoners, Israel's soldiers gave up the prisoners and plunder in the presence of the officials and the assembly. The men designated by name took the prisoners, and from the plunder they clothed all who were naked. Right? So they stripped them. They humiliated them beyond what God was intending. Now God could still use it. They provided them with clothes and sandals. God's like, okay, now go take care of them. I used you to discipline them, but you took it too far. Now you go take care of them. Now go restore them. Buy them everything that. Right? God's like, buy them clothes and sandals, food and drink, and healing balm, right? Now you go heal them. So God's teaching them. You just broke them down. You better restore them now. You can't just leave them like that. All those who were weak, they put on donkeys. So they took them back to their fellow Israelites at Jericho, the city of palms, and returned to Samaria. So that's one example. And then another example is Babylon. So Jeremiah 51. So this is Jeremiah prophesying about the fall of Babylon. So remember, Babylon destroyed Jerusalem, because they were unfaithful to God. Same exact scenario. Nebuchadnezzar comes, takes them captive, takes the king, takes his eyes out, right? So they're getting judged. But at some point, Babylon interjects their plan and adds, it's like they're trying to help God. And they took it too far. And so God still used it, right? They still had to, Israel still did wrong. They still had to spend 70 years in captivity. But it wasn't supposed to be God's original plan was messed with through Nebuchadnezzar because they took it too far. Before your eyes, I will repay Babylon and all who live in Babylonia for all the wrong they have done in Zion, Jerusalem, Israel, declares the Lord. And then keep going down. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, has devoured us. He has thrown us into confusion. He has made us an empty jar like a serpent. He has swallowed us and filled his stomach with our delicacies. And then he has spewed us out. May the violence done to our flesh be on Babylon, say the inhabitants of Zion. May our blood be on those who live in Babylonia, says Jerusalem. So you see the pattern here? Babylon must fall because of Israel's slain, just as the slain in all the earth have fallen because of Babylon. So it's basically what you sow is what you're going to reap. What Babylon sowed, which was the destruction of God's people without having God's heart, they're now going to have that destruction sown back on them. And I think this stuff is scary, but I personally think that in the modern age, when it comes to God's people, it's far worse. Because I'll just keep reading. I don't want to go on 25 tangents. Yes, Job. So Job. Okay, so did Job do wrong? Did Job not do wrong? So it says that Job was the most righteous man and powerful man in the East, right? But we see that Job has an issue with pride because he's questioning God. So the way I see it, God says that Job is righteous in God's eyes. So we're going to assume in this case, yes, Job has an issue with pride, but at the same time, God sees him as righteous. And that's why at the end, even though a lot of his friends are attacking him and they're saying a lot of good facts, truth is not a fact, right? What God says is truth. God said, Job is righteous in my eyes. And even though the friends are saying a bunch of facts like, Job, you shouldn't be talking like that, at the end, God rebukes the friends because God can handle his own business, right? That's the pattern of Job. Something happens to Job, whether or not he did wrong or not. In this case, it honestly doesn't even matter. All we know is that in the end, God handles Job. Who do you think you are, basically, right? And Job repents, and God restores him to double. See, that's the pattern. God wounds Job to restore him. But somewhere along the way, the friends want to interject. They want to help God. And they think they know better, and so they want to come and add to Job's pain. You see this? And God comes and rebukes them at the end. And in order for them to be restored, now Job, who they chastised, now has to pray for them to be restored. You see that? So there's a multi-angle test. The people come after Job. Job's like, why are you coming after me? But then Job has to forgive them in order for them to be restored. So God's teaching Job his heart, right? Let me read this. This is Job talking. He has alienated my family from me. My acquaintances are completely estranged from me. My relatives have gone away. My closest friends have forgotten me. My guests and my female servants count me a foreigner. They look on me as a stranger. I summon my servant, but he does not answer. Though I beg him with my mouth, My breath is offensive to my wife. I think about this. This guy is the most powerful man in the East. Let's say he's like Elon Musk, right? Everybody reports to him. Everybody respects him, right? He even said in other chapters that people bowed down to him in his presence because he had great power and respect, because he took care of the people, right? And now if we go back up, relatives left him. Anyone that's associated with him, even his servants don't even want to talk to him. His servant doesn't even respect him enough to answer his question. His wife doesn't want to talk to him. You see this? So why is it that everybody respects Job, but yet when Job goes through a hard time, now everybody treats Job with bias? You see this? This happens all the time in the church. All the time. Right? And I could see it a lot more nowadays that God has helped cleanse me of some of that character that I had in me. And I'm ashamed to even have done some of those things. And I hope you guys can reflect on yourself when I talk about this, because it's really like bothering my heart just thinking about it over the past few weeks. So think about it. Nobody knows. They assume Job did something wrong, but in reality, it's none of their business. Why are they treating Job like this? You see that? Why is it that his subordinates are now treating him with disrespect? Right? And this could be for a sheep, where a leader treats somebody differently. It's just, the point is, somebody goes through a hard time, and you may not know why that person's going through a hard time, but you know the information, and you start treating them with bias. You see that? That's a dangerous place to be in. 18, even the little boys scorn me. When I appear, they ridicule me. All my intimate friends detest me. His intimate friends detest him for what? Job didn't do anything. It's the simple fact that Job is, from their eyes, oh, God's coming after Job, so we better treat him in the same way. We better keep our distance. You see that? That's not our business, though. We need to let God handle his business. When pastors are disciplining somebody, you stay out of that unless they directly tell you, right? And leaders, I want you guys to listen, because this is really important. When God is disciplining somebody and God is using pastors, we got to stay out of that business. It's not our business, okay? That information might even be brought to us for our test. Are we going to treat that person with bias? Because if we do, God will come after you. I promise you, and I've personally experienced this. And it's not fun. It hurts, okay? And so you got to be very, very careful, because then we're just being a Pharisee, right? And the Pharisees were known for being hypocrites, for being fake, right? We don't want to be fake. I am nothing but skin and bones. I have escaped only by the skin of my teeth. He's telling his friends who are there around him, have pity on me, my friends. Have pity, for the hand of God has struck me. Key verse. Why do you pursue me as God does? Will you never get enough of my flesh? So Job's saying, look, I know God struck me, and I'm being handled by God. Why are you now trying to handle me? You see this? Why are we trying to help God and put our hand in the mix now? It's because we want some kind of credit. You see this? We want to... I'll give you guys some examples. And I'm going to get pretty real, because I've experienced some of this stuff. And I hope you guys can reflect, because I've seen this. For me, I've experienced it, and I've seen people do it. And it's really sad, to be honest. And I hope we can stop, because it's not cool. All right? Somebody comes and let's say, I'll use myself as an example, so no one feels that I'm coming after them personally. Let's say I'm having a conversation with Pastor, and he says, this person is being disciplined for this and this. I now know this information, so I go and I start treating, I'm not like, cussing that person out, but I start treating them differently. Like, like Job, right? Because I know God's coming after them, oh, I better treat them that same way because, that's what they deserve, right? This is human nature. We have ugliness inside of us that has to be cleansed. Okay? Now, God might allow that, God might even allow you to do that to that person. And God might now turn that person into a Joseph situation where he'll use the pain that you're inflicting on that person and use it to restore them and put it in your face, right? You got to be very, very careful because God is not, when it comes to, like God says, with the sheep, if we stumble the sheep, it's better that you basically go drown yourself. And I hear drowning is one of the worst ways a human could die. Why do you pursue me as God does? Will you never get enough of my flesh? Job's like, is it enough that I'm already being handled by God? Do I need my friends now to come attack me because they know some information? You see this? Let's go to the next one. This is Job still talking. If you say, how we will hound him is like, just like surrounding him, just in his business, just like flies, just like all around him. If you say, how we will hound him, since the root of trouble lies in him. So this is kind of like one of those like parable kind of verses. But I think I understand what it means. But let me finish 29. You should fear the sword yourselves, for wrath will bring punishment by the sword, and then you will know that there is judgment. So Job is saying in 28, he's saying, you guys know, or you guys think that there's something inside of me that I'm doing wrong. And whether that's true or not, it doesn't matter. Job's friends thought it was okay now. Oh, clearly Job's doing something wrong because God is striking him. So let's go add on to it. Let's go tell him, I told you so. Let's go tell him, I know you did wrong. This is why this is happening. This is why if you don't repent, if you don't do this, you're a bad person, blah, blah, blah. God never told them to go and instruct Job. God's hand is all over Job. He's already handled. He's on top of it. And the reason that we know that this is the case, because Job is, like I said, Job is saying, you guys know that I'm being handled, and so now you're treating me differently. And because of that, you should fear the sword yourself. For wrath will bring punishment by the sword, and then you will know that there is judgment. Then you're going to know that there's God. When you thought it was okay to act in this way, and God comes and handles you, and you're going to be like, oh, I'm sorry, God, I'm sorry, God. But by then it's too late, right? You have to learn. This is one of those things where you have to learn the hard way. There's no way around it. When it comes to hurting and stumbling God's people, you have to learn the hard way, because that is one thing that God will not have. God will not have his people stumbled, especially the new sheep, because like the verse says, you might as well just go drown yourself than stumble somebody, right? It sounds messed up, but that's God's words, not mine. So those are the verses that I thought of, and now I just want to talk. Time out. Okay, now, that was great. Why do people act this way? Think about that. Why would somebody feel the need to act this way? See, there's a motive in everything that we do, right? And like I said, I'm telling you from my own experience. I'm ashamed of even, I'm grateful that I can testify to help you guys, but at the same time, I'm ashamed that I even have to testify to say that I've participated in some of this, right? It's kind of an oxymoron. And we're so used to God's loving mercy and grace that I think sometimes we kind of take things for granted, and I think we take sin for granted. And when you grow up and let's say your mother didn't raise you that way, you should be ashamed of yourself, right? we need to get back to those old school roots. I think in a lot of ways, God always does a new thing, but a lot of his methods are very old-fashioned. Think about it. He values connection. He values restoration. He values forgiveness. He speaks through our pastors and says, "Go read a book." Right? And in an age where I can go into a virtual reality, God wants us to read books. God's trying to teach us and train us on things that matter, right? What are the things that matter in this life? And that's the season that's what I've learned in this season. I'm grateful that I can even have this perception and this revelation now to even say, focus on things that matter. Because I'm the person that always focuses on the things that don't matter. I'm the epitome of that person. But yet I can somehow come up here and say, you got to focus on the things that matter. That's God, okay? Anybody that knows me, that's God. So, back to my point. Why would somebody feel the need to act this way toward another family member in our church? And this isn't hypothetical. This happens here, and I see it, and it's got to stop, right? Because at some point, God's not going to be happy to a point where you're going to have to pay your dues. I'd rather not have that happen from experience, okay? I don't mean to get heavy, and I was praying all day today. I was in the shower. I'm like, I honestly felt that this message would be too confrontational, and I was like, I don't know, God, maybe is it just me? Is it just my bias? I'm not trying, I don't want to go hurt somebody, but anytime I try to think about anything else, the only thing I can think of, I'm taking a shower, I'm going on a walk, I'm working on music, anything, it's the only thing I'm thinking of. And then I read Job today, and then those 2 verses are in the first 3 minutes of my reading. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go and talk about it. Maybe it needs to be said. So I think it does need to be said. And so I hope that even though it's, a little heavy, I hope you guys can, and no, I'm not done yet. But even though it's a little heavy, I hope you guys can take a step back like I've been able to do in this season and just ask yourself this question, very simple question. Am I nice to people? Am I a nice person? For me, that answer was so easy to say no. Whether it was in here, whether it was people outside of the church, I was just a mean person. And I'm not trying to say this to get pity. I don't need nobody's pity. I'm telling you this because God goes, like I said, God does new things. But his roots are very old-fashioned. He wants kindness. He wants you to be nice to people. He wants you to just be a human, have a heart, right? Don't be mean to people. Don't kick somebody when they're down. God will use it, okay? God will use that. I promise you that. Because it tells us in the Bible. You got David, you got Joseph. Huge characters. But just be nice. It's so simple, and pastor has to find 26 different angles to try to help you guys and say, whatever God helps him be creative with, But the core of the message is we got to change, right? We can't be chasing the wrong things. And when we're chasing the wrong things, people are secondary. You see that? When people become secondary, you don't even flinch treating people bad. Okay? I'm telling you this from experience. When your focus is on the wrong thing, remember this focus of this ministry is God. Right? We can get nice houses, we can get nice cars, we can get nice shoes, we can be blessed, we can, get some great investment, we can, you name it. We can become trillionaires. Who cares? All God cares about is him and me. That's it. Because if you go back to the Garden of Eden, there's nothing. All there is nature, animals, Adam, and God. And so God values that relationship. And you could see the hints of this because when they sinned and now they covered themselves with the leaves, they're covering themselves with the things they think is important. They think that clothing themselves of their nakedness is important. And God's like, who told you those things are important? Where did you even think to find that those things are important? You see this? God spiritually wants us to just, I don't want to say this in like a weird way, but like, you know, when they didn't have clothes, they were naked, right? God wants us to have that kind of faith with him, where we are vulnerable, right? We can empathize with people, right? When somebody cries, they can have a shoulder to cry on. When somebody's down, even if they're being disciplined by God, right? You still treat them with kindness, right? We don't know why God is doing certain things. God does it because he loves us. And so his method is to correct us, get that stuff out, and restore us. So that should be our demeanor. Our demeanor is, we know God is handling them, but we're just going to treat them with the hope that they get restored. You see this? This is very important. And I keep getting sidetracked, but why do people treat others in this way? I'm just going to get personal here. Why in the church do people feel like, in this church, especially leaders sometimes, and I'm talking from my experience, why do we feel the need to be mean to each other? You see this? Why do we feel the need to put other people down when somebody's being disciplined? Why do we feel the need to add to somebody's correction when they're already being handled by God? These are all heavy questions, right? Doesn't get talked about a lot, but I'm going to talk about it because I think it needs to be talked about. I'm going to give some examples. No, wait. Before I forget again, why do people act in this way? Gosh, it's like the 5th time. People act this way because of their insecurity. And why is there an insecurity? Because their focus is on the wrong thing. Insecurity is formed when our focus is on the wrong thing. So let's say, my case, I'll use myself again. Let's say I am focused on the wrong thing. I'm focused on material possessions, which I have been and I've testified about. And so my focus is now on those things and God is secondary. And so anything that gets in the way of me looking good, me being approved, me having status, is anything that gets in that way is going to get the hand, right? Going to get the Heisman, right? Because that's my number one. You see that? But if my focus is on God, now anything that gets in the way of me and God, I'm pushing those aside to keep my relationship with him. You see that? All the things of God, kindness, loving people, having his heart, those things get pushed aside when you're focused on your number one. And so a lot of people's number one, and I see this, is they want to look good in front of other people. And I've been one of those people. And so when an opportunity arises for you to look good in front of somebody, you are willing to push somebody aside, put somebody down, so that your number one is protected, which is your butt. You want your butt protected, right? And there's many words and phrases for that, and I'll let you imagine all you want. But that's the reality. When we have an insecurity and our focus is on the wrong thing, we're going to attack the things that are going after our number one. And if our number one is our own will, and our number one, and most of the time, like I said, is we want to look good. We want to be approved. Because our focus is not on God, we don't know who we are in God. So we are insecure. There's a hole in us. So we want to fill that through what? And pastors have talked about this. I don't know if pastor said it a few weeks ago. It was like a half a sentence, but I caught it. And I still remember it. And he said, yeah, I talked about it too in my sermon. Remember, I said, if we're so focused on pleasing our pastors and being people pleasers, then we're not trusting in God. So God had to cut my umbilical cord so I can go back to him. And when I please God and I serve pastors with the right heart, God's going to restore everything. You see this? But if my motive is that I want to look good and my life is a mess behind closed doors, let me what's a good one? Right, Pastor said that a few weeks ago, when an opportunity arises, if it's your opportunity, God will allow it to happen naturally, right? We don't have to run and say, I'm going to clean this. No. I'm going to get out of my way, right? I see this too much. We got to stop, right? When God wants an opportunity for you, that door will open and it'll be, you'll just slide right in and you'll be able to serve, right? If you have the right heart. And here's the thing. And I know a lot of people have experienced this, but let's say in that case where you see an opportunity and you go to serve, and then someone else wants to push you aside and try to get to that opportunity first, God's going to bless the person who had the right heart, even though the person went and actually served. You see that? Because that person's motive is to look good in front of others. And God, what did God say about looking good? If you want to look good in front of others, well, then that's your reward. So the person who did nothing is going to get the reward. Now that's crazy, right? So I'm just telling you real life examples that I see, that I've done, that I've experienced, and I hope that it helps you guys, right? What's another example? The other example I talked about is pastor gives you information about somebody. And I'll tell you right now, I'm going to give you guys a secret. You want a secret? Okay. We're at the table, and pastor's talking. Who's inspired by God, right? We have to remember this. That's our authority. And so pastor might say, this person's going through this and this right now. And you might know, you know what? Yeah, they did do that. The other day, I was over there and I seen them do the same thing. Test failed. Your job in that moment is just zip it. Keep your mouth shut. That information is coming to you for a reason. It might actually be for you. You might not go through that yet, but you might get that test later, and now you'll remember that conversation. And because you didn't judge that other person, now God's going to help you in your time of need. But if you're going and attacking somebody else in their time of need, what do you think is going to come your way? An attack in your time of need. And then you're going to be, God, why didn't you help me? Why am I stuck? God's going to say, why did you treat this person in this way when they were in a time of need? You see that? Now, this angle is for the person who has an ability to correct or treat somebody in a certain way. But that doesn't mean you can take advantage of that if you're the person who's in that season, right? You got to take everything with context. But the reason why people do that, again, that certain situation, I'm giving you hypothetical examples because these are the two things that I see a lot. People pushing each other out of the way to try to serve when it's not their time. Well, they're just wasting their time because the person who had the right heart is going to get the reward anyway. So remember that. And second, if you're giving information, don't try to add to that person's misfortune because of your own insecurity, okay? Think about it. I am somebody that has an extra information, and I want to give it to pastor to help him, and so I can look good. That has nothing to do with that person. You don't care whether that person is restored or not. You just want to be in with pastor, so you'll say, you know what? Yeah, I saw that person. I can't believe they did that. You think you know people, huh? You think you know people. You don't even know yourself. You think I should say, man, I don't even know myself. Let's all walk around and say that. I don't even know myself. Like, just like you're a bot in some video game. I don't even know myself. I don't even know myself, right? I'd rather see that than us judging other people, right? And again, why do we do that? Because of our insecurity. We want to look like we provided and helped in the situation so that we can look good and be approved by our pastors. Now, you got to be careful because pastors talk about this many times. They are an intermediary before God, right? It's like Bishop Kim. He doesn't want people bowing down to him. Pastors don't want that. They want us to serve with the right heart and serve God. And if we pray for an opportunity to serve and we have the right heart, God will open that. You want to, treat somebody, you want to give a gift to pastor, or you want to this or that. Be led. Let it be the right time, right? Don't force it. Pray for the opportunity if you really have the right heart, and God will allow it. Don't try to force things ahead of your time so that you can now look like you're in the inn and you can be approved because you don't have a connection with God yet. And so that insecurity is there. You see this? So I want to recap everything because I feel like this is super important information that I've learned in this past 11, 12 months. And it needs to be relayed because Pastor talks about the family growing before we grow. Our family being close-knit, right? We cannot be a family in shambles having people come. And the scary part is, what if God sends people when we're not ready? Then all this that I just talked about is going to happen. And then you're going to get judged. You see this? We need to be ready now with our own family that's already here. Be nice to people, right? Treat people with kindness. Don't add to somebody's affliction when they're already being dealt with by God. Pastors are on it, leave it be. If they didn't ask you, you don't need to interject your 2 cents. Just keep your mouth shut, right? That's wisdom, right? It says in Proverbs that if you talk too much, it's bound to be sin. Oh, wow, is that true? That is so true. It said that in the Bible also, just give a simple yes or no. Think about that. I'm so guilty of this, okay? I'm so guilty of talking back, and I've learned through these hard ways of learning that your answer should be yes or no. And if it's yes, mean yes, and if it's no, mean no. And if you mean no, you better be right because God's gonna come after you, you know what I'm saying? But just be respectful, be nice, right? There's a book that my mom was reading to Rachel. It's called The ABCs of Kindness. It was like the most amazing book I've ever read. And it was an infant book. And I think I might post it on band so everybody can read it. It was like just love somebody when they're going through a hard time. Just be kind, be grateful. It was so things that we just take for granted, right? But at the end of the day, if I could have you guys walk away with 2 things. 1, do not ever add to somebody's correction when they're already being handled with, and it's because it's not your business. If you do, I guarantee you 125% that it'll come back on you. And I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm just saving you trouble and heartache. And then 2, find your relationship with God first, because when you do that, everything else will be restored. And to end it, we need to focus here, right? We got to stop competing. We got to stop who got the bigger blessing. Who cares? The blessing is God. We're already in the blessing. We're in this house. We're with God. That's the blessing. What matters is how do we advance God's kingdom so that more people can be saved. And the way that that's done is having a strong intermediary. God uses people to get to other people. Those intermediaries are us, right? We have to be close-knit. We have to be one. We have to be that one intermediary, not the leaders and 25 stragglers on the side and 15 people who are in between, right? It's because everybody's motives are wrong. Our motives need to be centered on God. And you can tell, I accidentally turned it off. You can tell because, when there's fighting and arguments, that's how you know that something's wrong. If we're pushing each other out of the way to look good, if we're trying to add to somebody's correction so we can look good, then we are automatically wrong. Back up, go read the ABCs of kindness, and just be nice, right? Be a good person, right? And, if you are treating people in that way, you should be ashamed of yourself, okay? I don't like to use that word, but I'm ashamed of myself for treating people in that way. That's not how I was raised in this church, okay? That was through my own insecurity. So if you're acting that way towards people, you should go look in the mirror and you should be ashamed of yourself for acting like that. And I'm not trying to be mean. I'm trying to just wake some people up, because that's not how God raised us. That's not how our parents raised us. We need to treat people with kindness and love, period. That covers all the law. That's what matters to God. And when we do that and we stay out of people's business, everything will just naturally come together. Leaders will come together better more. Leaders and the children will be restored to the fathers, right? All of a sudden, household will start getting close to their to the people over them. Everything will be restored naturally. When there's blockage, something's out of order, right? So think about what I said. I didn't mean for it to be so harsh, but that's just what came out, So, God was very direct with me, and it helped me. So maybe it can help you guys. Amen?